Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen, and I am super excited. And is it Hi Mag? Did I say that right?
Absolutely, yes, correct.
Nailed it. All right. So Hi is from Eva. I always like to start this out. Tell us, why would a seller who is in a state of wanting to dig into that realm of monetizing mental capital, why would they want to hear from you? What do you have to offer on the topic that someone else might not?
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me, Will. I mean, it's a very exciting topic when you talk about the mental capital. It's a combination of like knowledge, expertise, automation of processes all together, kind of delivers that mental capital. And one of the things that I see with the e-commerce sellers, Amazon sellers, I mean, obviously they focus on a product and then they start selling on Amazon or other marketplaces. They know how to sell, but there is a lot of these expertise at some point that they can also, standardize in terms of SOPs and even the SOPs, which might be manual first, can be automated. And with that automation plus having these processes that can also be a kind of a standard, not only for that Amazon seller, or that e-commerce seller, but for other e-commerce sellers too, which means that the others can also, leverage the best practices. So, and that is exactly kind of the mental capital, I think, a lot of e-commerce sellers can benefit from their experiences if there is a way for them to share that knowledge and also monetize that knowledge.
Gotcha. So you've a little of this before, it sounds like.
Absolutely. So just to give you a bit of a background here, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of Eva, and Eva is an AI optimized tech platform which helps with advertising, like bid optimization, campaign management, dynamic pricing, profit analytics, and reimbursements. So that's the focus of Eva. We are also an agency, so we cover the entire A to Z full service account management for Amazon, Walmart, Wayfair, eBay, Faire, and many other marketplaces too. So meaning that, and we're doing it for the last 4 years, and meaning that every single day for us, it's a process of understanding like what might be the benefit to the e-commerce sellers, create a standard operating procedure, automate it, and even create the product features, functions around that. So we are going through this cycle pretty much every day.
So as you dig into that, what would you say, tell me about the background. What got you, where did you start this journey of monetizing mental capital? And the reason I like to ask that question, and actually I like to ask it in this way, can you remember the first time that you monetized mental capital? For my kids, they're probably going to tell the story someday if somebody ever asks them this question of going out and setting up a lemonade stand, on the corner of the block. And I've seen them pull in $150 in a day selling lemonade. It's kind of crazy, but I'm curious, what's the first time you've ever monetized mental capital?
Well, even for me, the lemonade was the starting point, I have to say. So if I kind of like talk about the business life, before starting Eva for more than 20 years, I was in the enterprise software development and consulting space. And I worked in 3 main companies, Accenture, IBM, and Oracle, which have more than 500,000 employees each. So, and in that type of a company, instead of, and I mean, I always kind of believe that the entrepreneurship is a genetic disorder. I mean, I'm kind of never like recommending it, but when you have that disorder already in your genes, then if you're working for large companies, then you become an intrapreneur and you start kind of trying to build things and try to use your mental capital, even if you are in a very large organization. And I mean, there are two kind of different types of maybe two different ways. One is like productifying or creating a product out of the mental capital. And maybe a second way is like creating a service out of that mental capital. And even in the early days, after a few years that I was a consultant, I realized that as I learn things, then the people start asking me, even outside of the organization, like, how can I help them? And it kind of started like, I kind of like see that I was able to do some, engagements, like people just call me and get an expert view for a couple of hours. And I mean, very interesting. I remember like even 6, 7 years ago, I was able to bill almost like $1,000 an hour
Mm,
to discuss with large companies a couple of hours about whatever, kind of, questions they have,
mm.
especially to transform their business into a more agile organization. So it was so amazing to see that it kind of created a side benefit for me. So that was more on the consulting space. And with Eva, it was more about like how to create a product out of this, which we can maybe talk in detail, if you're
Yeah.
interested.
So let's look at that for the, $1,000 an hour. Was that kind of the first time you dived into consulting? When you were trying to figure out where to go with that, did they just come up and say, "Hey, I'll pay you $1,000 an hour," or did you have to kind of go through a process to figure out what that would look like?
Things didn't start with $1,000 an hour. Obviously, it was more a couple of $100. But I mean, I was in the enterprise architecture space, and one of the things is like, it's not about also your expertise, but what is the value that you can deliver, right? So it depends on the value. Now, if that conversation helps, let's say, an e-commerce seller to begin their journey, probably it will be a few $100 or maybe even less. But if it is about a large brand struggling on Amazon, and the conversation will lead into a 5% sales increase, then the value is much bigger, right? Then you can build more, which means that it is not only about your expertise, how much you are earning from your mental capital, but what is the value that you are delivering. If you can clearly define the value, then you can monetize it in a better way.
So I love that. So if I'm a seller and I'm looking at perhaps helping other sellers get started or helping large brands that are struggling get past those struggles, whatever that might be, I think if I were to maybe do an audit of my skills. So because I think that's one of the things I think people have a hard time with is, how do I get started, right? How do I identify what I actually could monetize? And I think it probably starts with writing down the pains that you're seeing and pains you're seeing from people who have deep pockets, right? So if deep pockets or a ginormous, for me, as I kind of look at new markets to get into or look at different pieces, let's say that you owned or you were good friends with somebody who had a community of 100,000 people who want to become an Amazon seller. Well, that distribution channel means that your expertise in like, oh, well, I'm just going to create a course on starting that. Well, how much is that course worth? And you kind of got to look at it on a micro level and say, okay, for one person, if they actually take this course, get all the way through it and apply the principles, they're going to be making, $1,000 a month on Amazon the first month, and then, and so on and so forth. So how much is that actually worth? What's the value there? And I think at that point, they can go back and say, okay, well, a couple $100 times by the 100,000 people that are in here, even if I only convert 5%, well worth my time to create the course and kind of connect those dots. So I think it's either a distribution channel that you have access to, or if it's not a distribution channel, I think you do need to kind of analyze, okay, what are the problems that people that I know have, they've got deep pockets and big problems. And then kind of trying to identify, okay, what are their problems and which of those problems do I know how to solve? And then from there, building it.
The way I would look into it is like the first question is what the people want, which is more about the pains that they realize. There is a second question, which is what the people need, because maybe they don't know what they really don't know, but you can also point out that. Now, it is a lot easier to address the question, what the people want, rather than what the people need. But what the people need can be an upsell opportunity in selling, right? I mean, the next level of your service, because they don't know yet. But by addressing the question, what they want, then you're already building the trust. And then as a next step, you can go to the what they need question and address that too. Now, if we go back to the what they want question, the best way to unleash the value is if you can quantify the benefit. Now, the less the benefit can be quantified, the more you can only build based on number of hours or whatever the course you generate. You can say that it's $100 or $500 fixed price, just do it. And because you're like, I'm teaching you how to start on Amazon, for example, but it's not exactly clear what the benefit would be, because every single product journey, seller journey is very different, number one. Number two, we all know that 90%, not less, of Amazon Amazon sellers' journeys will fail. So there is only 10% that will make it. And now you can also claim that, I'm going to make you successful, but it will not be depending on a course, because there are so many external factors that impact that success as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you can quantify, for example, if an Amazon seller is expert on advertising, on PPC, and can clearly define that after an audit, I'm able to improve your ACOS by X%, and I'm going to grow your revenue by Y%.
Yep.
But now you already quantified that, which means that you can easily have a value-based sales too, right? Because it's very clear like how much value you can generate. The only thing that the other side may ask is like, okay, if you're committing to this, then why don't I pay you in a performance-based way? Now, there's the risk and reward of that performance-based work. But I mean, if the person is an expert, if he's already claiming he can do it, why not to dig into it? Why not to do it, right? I mean, a performance-based way, rather than I'm gonna bill you a few $100 per day or whatever,
It's interesting because I think as I've done that myself and kind of picked apart and looked at what's there, I found that if I can quantify it, it is much easier to close the sale because I can understand what's going on. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have a conversation with, so let's say that I've got, other Amazon sellers, or I'm beginning to kind of identify things that I can do for other people. If I dig into their pain and I start to say, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that pain. Tell me a little bit more about that pain. Why is that important? Why is that important? Tell me more about that pain. They'll start to really feel that pain. And then I would say, okay, so what would be different in the world if that pain went away? Like, what would that mean for revenue? What would that mean for X, Y, or Z? And I found that customers will often quantify it for you. They'll tell you, man, if that pain went away, my life would be totally different. And we would kind of connect all of those different dots in seeing, what that looks like. you've got multiple different ways that different pieces can be put together to kind of connect there. And I mean, that's part of what we're doing at Seller Labs, is focusing specifically on agencies and agencies who sell to e-commerce, and looking at their pain and completely eliminating the need to go connect to the Amazon API or cleanse any Amazon data. We've got a SQL database that we connect it all to so that it's just there. And I've heard many of them say, if I could make this go away completely, there's X amount of revenue that we could see additional to kind of connect those different dots. And I think you're absolutely right. Connecting that that pain to a problem, and then that problem to a dollar amount, and then that dollar amount to the overall solution gives you an idea. Okay, well, if I were spending that money, I'd want a 5x return. So, if you're solving $100,000 problem, you can solve 20 grand for it, or you can you could charge 20 grand for it.
Exactly. It's either you are generating more revenue or profit, or, for example, in the example you gave, maybe you are reducing the operational complexity, or you are reducing the time that they spend to connect to Amazon APIs and all things like that. That's already easy to quantify as well. Now, even before, let's go back to the first step. One of the frameworks that I really like, it was developed around 2008. It's called Challenger Sales. I would recommend, anybody who's listening to look into that. And in Challenger Sales, the first step is having that conversation, if possible, for monetizing the mental capital, having the first conversation in a free mode, maybe, having that freebie, which might be a 30 minutes conversation, a 1 hour conversation. But in that conversation with your potential customer, you're already delivering a commercial teaching. It's called the commercial teaching, where you understand the pain, reframe it, because there is a different solution, right? These guys are experts. They know, not experts, but they're already in that business. They do it in a certain way, like the example you gave. Oh, they are already connecting the Amazon account. So there's something that's already done. But now what you are doing is, in that free session, you are understanding the way they do the things, then explain it by reframing the problem and creating a different way of a solution, and then explaining how this can help them at the end. Because if you're able to get to that free session, as you are going to deliver after that, whatever that outcome is, and the success criteria of that free session is, if somebody is asking you the question, wow, that's great, how can we do it? How much does it cost? If the end result is that questions, then you already close the deal, because that's where you're going to be delivering that value, the how part. But in this commercial teaching phase, you're already talking about the way you're going to do it. What is it that you are going to do, and how do you reframe it, and why it is important, what will be the outcome. And then you move to the next step, which is the billable engagement, for example.
So what would you say, from the Challenger sales model and applying that to this situation, what would you say is the thing that an Amazon seller might be surprised by if they were to go read that book and dig into that course and apply that to their idea of selling non-tangible products or monetizing mental capital? What would you say is the part that they'd be like, oh, wow, that was not common sense to use it in that way?
Again, back to our first point was to identify the pain, right? It's more about what they want, because there is a pain point. And even if you look at I don't know, we have 1,000+ customers. When I look at the major reason why the customers are coming to us in the e-commerce space today, the number one reason is advertising related. it's retail media problems. Now, maybe a second reason is inventory problems. Okay, the third reason is pricing problems. And they want to achieve a goal, but the Amazon seller wants to achieve a goal with that advertising, but he doesn't know how to look into advertising in the right way. What is the best way? Like, what is it that's missing? Now, that is where the challenger sales comes in, and why it is called challenger sales, because the customer, like the potential customer, may think that, these guys will do the advertising better, where what the Amazon seller solution is to challenge the customer. Hey, it's not about doing the same thing better. Maybe you need to do the things in a different way rather than doing the things right, which maybe you're not doing the right things, and then reframe the conversation. So that will be also the challenging part, right? So you're challenging the other side that the way you do it, if you can improve it by 5%, but you're just doing the things right, and there is a different way to do it, which is the reframing of the solution. And that's where you build the trust, if that makes sense, what you do, what you reframe. I hope it's clear. A bit of an abstract, kind of conversation, but a lot of times we see the same situation with our customers. Like, what they think is the solution is not the solution, and there is a different way to do it.
So what questions can I ask, and how can I ask them to make sure that I'm not creating bias in the way that I'm seeking the solution, so that I actually understand the true problem instead of whatever I think the solution should be?
It's kind of like, it's hard to say that you from a selling point of view is not biased, because at the end of the day, for example, whether it's Eva or Seller Labs, the solution that Seller Labs or Eva can provide is kind of clear. Now, instead of going into that solution directly, because the end result is clear, in the sales model, whatever you want to sell, that's already specific, unless you are very much like selling your expertise and it's completely tailored to a specific situation. But in agencies or the product companies like ours, the solution is already, defined. We know that. Now, the question is how to move from a specific problem that the customer thinks my problem is specific, only applicable to me, but it's not the case, right? So there is always the reframing is where you are tailoring the solution. It's almost like a patient-doctor relationship, where the doctor knows the solutions, but every patient is different, but the solutions are the same in a way. But this tailoring needs to be done, right? Because everybody's category is different, or the ACOS levels, TACOS, if it's about retail media, like there's all specifics, but pretty much the solution is the same. The parameters are different, right? So, and that's what you're trying to figure out in the beginning, to understand what the parameters are, to make sure that the customer feels that you are delivering a special solution to them, which is not that special actually, because it's already the product which should be applicable to most of the sellers, right? By definition, because if your product is only applicable to 1% of the sellers, then it also doesn't make sense at the end of the day that your target market, you're not matching with your solution, right? But if it is applicable to 90%, and if you're now tailoring the solution to the needs, then you build the connection.
Got it. So it's about resonating with that pain to the point where they think, oh, yeah, this is going to solve exactly what I have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And instead of like, then now also you are changing the way, the perception, because a typical salesperson will start immediately talking about his product and features. Now that salesperson didn't understand yet what is the pain. Like he believed, okay, I have an advertising problem. Okay, here is the solution. We have these features. You can do this, you can do that, you can do hourly bid automation, this, that. Well, but you know, this is the one of the biggest mistakes of the selling process, right? Like to start from your product and your features and how great you are and how differentiated you are. And a lot of salespeople do that. But the first step is always like, hey, you have an advertising problem. I understand. What is it that you believe that your problem is? And start from there, reframe. When you build the trust between the customer and you, the customer will always ask that question at the end, which is, how can I do what you say? Because you're not talking about the product. You are talking about the way to do it much more effective, efficient, grow the revenue. You reframed it. And the question now coming from the customer is, how? And now you made it. You're already there now. Okay, by the way, here is the product. It can do it. You don't need to sell it anymore. It's the last step when you talk about the product, not the first step.
Got it. So if I'm trying to figure out a new service that I'm trying to sell or look at those different pieces, jump on the phone with lots of different people. I talk through the different things that people are seeing, and I start to really dig into the pain, and I start to talk about, you know, my life or the life of my clients that I've seen be better, and kind of connect those different dots between pain to bliss, right? Like I'm going from that pain over to this new world, and eventually they're going to be like, okay, how do you do that?
Right.
Because I want that state of bliss that you're talking about, that state of success that you're talking about. That's what I'm looking for. And I think at that point they're like, okay, let me in. I'm interested. Like, what do we do here? And you kind of can pick that apart and see where it goes. So I totally hear you 100% there. And they'll tell you how much you should charge for it too, because you can start asking questions around, okay, well, if this pain went away and became that bliss, what would that mean for you from a money perspective? And people are pretty open about that aspect of it. I love that. As you've looked back over your career, what would you say have been the biggest roadblocks in monetizing mental capital for you?
Right. I mean, kind of a tough question when I talk about the roadblocks. I mean, because there are different types of roadblocks here, especially, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, at least you don't have the limitations of the company that you are working in a way to monetize the mental capital. But we already gave the example, even if you work in the company and using a methodology like Challenger, you can easily kind of like, you know, explain that pain and, you know, kind of realize the value and talk about your product at the end. So the overall process still will be the same. Having said that, I mean, there is the other things that will always restrict you. First of all, I mean, and it's nothing very different than a typical sales process where you have some restrictions, the external ones. For example, the budget is a restriction. So you can still believe that there is a lot of value. And the best way to overcome that budget issue is to, to explain the value in the best way, right? Because then the value already justifies the budget. But depending on the type of the customer segment that you are addressing, the budget can still be an issue, right? So that will be a roadblocker for you. The second is, I always, think about like whether you are an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, are you talking to the right person? Like maybe you're addressing the pain of an operator, let's say there is a, like maybe the value is very relevant to a CEO or the owner of the e-commerce company, but the same company's e-commerce director's personal benefit is not there, which means that you're not talking to the right, like you have great value, but in a way that you are eliminating 50% of the justification of some guy, which you're talking to that guy now. And you're kind of like already delivering the value. It's amazing. But the guy is already thinking that, hey, I mean, if I do this,
if I do this, I might not have a job.
Exactly. So the audience, and are you talking to the right people when you are selling is also very important besides the budget. Maybe a third one is it the right time for them? Like, I mean, they love it. Oh yeah, this is great. Yeah, we can do it. Fine. But is this the right time? Meaning that for many different reasons, it might not be the right time. For example, where are the available resources? They don't have resources like to help. Again, for example, we talked about launching on Amazon. From my point of view, the presence like influencer marketing, a lot of other things like Google, presence in retail. There's a lot of aspects of being successful on Amazon. If the others are not there, and if it's just about Amazon, the chances will be less likely. Then you're asking, like, for example, I always ask, what is your non-Amazon strategy? Is it existing? Like, do you have influencers? Is this product already used by some thousand consumers in the past for some reason? You see that it's not the right time. So you can start doing things, but it will not generate the value that you're expecting, or they are not deciding because it's not the right time. So yeah, I think these are the kind of the blockers pretty much that I can think about right now when I think about. And the best way to overcome these blockers is not to get too excited when you see that you are addressing the pain, you have the right value, everything is great, so you're happy, but nothing happens after that, which means that you're not asking the right questions when you build that trust, like, hey, which means that this is the budget. Do you think you can afford this?
Gotcha.
Maybe you that question. Or are you the right person? Or do we have other people like need to listen this? Is this a consensus purchase rather than an individual one? So these are the things that you need to ask when you build the trust, rather than get excited and think that you're going to start next week, which maybe.
Heard. Okay, so shifting the conversation just a little bit, I want you to imagine real quick that I handed you a cell phone, and this cell phone actually is able to talk back to Hai back when he was working at these, 50,000 plus people working their companies. You were back when you were working as an intrapreneur. You pick up the phone and it's like, hi, this is Hai. And you start realizing, oh my gosh, I can talk to me, 15 to 25 years ago. Like I can give myself advice about monetizing my mental capital. If you could pick up that phone right now and talk to him, what advice would you give him to help him upscale his ability to monetize mental capital?
The advice that I'm going to give myself will be different than the advice that I'm going to give to other people. Because again, it all starts by discovering whether you have that genetic disorder of being an entrepreneur. Now, because I do have it, but I understood it after 21 years. So if I go back, I would say that guy take even more risks, where I took a lot of risks in my life. Pretty much anything that is more than 5% chance, I jumped in. If there is a 5% chance, I did it. But I think even taking more risks, and then calculate that risks, try to eliminating uncertainties, but always creating a discomfort zone rather than comfort zone for yourself when you are between 20 to 40. I think it makes a lot of sense because even if you're in 20s, there's nothing to lose. There's another 50 years of work life. Who cares? You can make mistakes, but there is a lot to learn from the failures rather than the mistakes, where I see a lot of people not taking any risks and not creating these comfort zones and stop learning and focus on what they have and try to optimize it X%, which is not the way. If you want to have this exponential growth, really a great success, I would go back and tell myself when I was 20x years old, even
Get
take,
uncomfortable.
yeah, be uncomfortable, take more risks, do whatever. I mean, I did pretty much a lot of things, but I can even take more risks and I can be faster in the position of an entrepreneur. Now it's only for me, but because for another person who was risk, not that, like
Risk adverse. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, risky person, then it will be different. But even for that person, I would always say, are you comfortable in what you are doing? Do you feel the comfort in your life? And if the answer is yes, then I would say there is something wrong here.
Got it.
Absolutely something wrong.
So let's imagine we're going to do two last things here on our podcast. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. So we're going to imagine that you stepped into an elevator with an Amazon seller and you've got 60 seconds to tell them a little bit about Eva or invite them to check out the product or look at that. So you've got 60 seconds to chat about that. Then right afterwards, I want you to share any tips, tricks, hacks, or books that you've come across in the last year that have helped you upscale your mental capital. So we're going to give you 60 seconds. I'm going to time it here on my watch and I'll cut you off at that 60-second mark. And then right afterwards, I want any tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you upscale your mental capital. Here you go.
Hey, Amazon seller, are you, adapted? Like, have you adapted the artificial intelligence in the best way to automate your business and grow your revenues? Then probably Eva can be a good solution to look at, where we are able to use AI not only for campaign management and bid optimization and advertising, but also for dynamic pricing and reimbursements. I believe we can improve your revenues by at least 20% and also increase your profits by an additional 15 to 20%. And the way to start it is very free. Like, let's do an audit, let's do a 12 months projection, and let's see how it goes. It's just a free engagement. You'll just benefit from it.
Cool. Well, you had 5 more seconds left. That's awesome. Tips, tricks, hacks, or books that you've come across in the last year that have helped you upscale your ability.
Yeah, just because we already talked about the Challenger sales, I would recommend that, because there's like 3 books. Now, the first one is the Challenger sales, and then there is a continuation of that. The last one, the third book, is, I think, released last year. And there's 3 books in that Challenger sales that can give a great idea to anyone who is positioning their mental capital. As we already talked about that, I think it will be very interesting for people to look into that as well. In terms of if we are specific to Amazon sellers, tips and tricks, maybe 2 things that I can see immediately. One is there is a great way, which is called this reimbursements, Amazon reimbursements. You can recover 2 to 5% of your revenue. Today is the right time for Amazon sellers just to focus on profits. So we do that with a 11% success fee, which is the lowest in the market. So it's not only about generating revenue from Amazon with reimbursements, but also like they can easily get that service at 11% success fee. And secondly, I see the hourly bidding on the campaign management is generating 10 to 15% better results rather than daily changing the campaign bids. That's what we see with Eva. We can do it with AI. It can also be done with some Amazon automation without using Eva, but that's an area that I would also appreciate if the people look into that hourly bidding. on campaigns.
Cool. Well, appreciate your time there. Definitely something to look into from the challenger sales model. Appreciate you being on the podcast. Hi. And I think we'll wrap it up there for our episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital.
Thanks a lot for having me, Will. Thank you.